What does it actually mean to be awake? For years, the word awakening has been used to describe something mysterious. People talk about higher consciousness, spiritual awakening, ascension, higher dimensions, and contact with beings who are supposedly far beyond our understanding. But what if being awake has nothing to do with seeing something supernatural? What if it is much more difficult than that? According to a message attributed to the 9D Arcturian Council, spiritual awakening is not simply about discovering hidden information. It is about remembering who you are and then changing the way you live. The message begins with a powerful idea. Human beings may be far more powerful than they believe themselves to be. Not necessarily because they possess secret technology, not because they have supernatural abilities, but because they have forgotten their deeper identity. The Arcturian message describes this identity as connected to Source, to something greater than the individual self. And according to this perspective, awakening begins when a person stops asking only, "What can I get from life?" and starts asking, "Who am I being in this life?" That is a very different question, because knowing something intellectually is easy, living it is much harder, and that may be the real challenge of awakening. The message comes from what is described as the 9D Arcturian Council. Within spiritual and channeling communities, the Arcturians are often described as an advanced extraterrestrial civilization associated with higher consciousness, healing, wisdom, and spiritual guidance. The 9D designation refers to the ninth dimension within the spiritual framework, but there is an important distinction. This is not a scientific classification of an extraterrestrial civilization. There is currently no independently verified scientific evidence demonstrating that a ninth-dimensional Arcturian council exists. Instead, this belongs to the world of spiritual belief, channeling, and metaphysical interpretation. And that distinction matters, because we can explore the message without pretending that its supernatural claims have been scientifically proven. In fact, that makes the message more interesting, because beneath the extraterrestrial language, there's a very human question. How should a person live? The Arcturian message repeatedly returns to the idea that human beings have forgotten who they really are, and it suggests that awakening is a process of remembering, not remembering a secret name, not remembering a past life identity, but remembering a deeper sense of connection. The message calls this Source. Others might call it God, the universe, consciousness, the One, or simply the deeper self. The name changes, but the question remains. What happens when you begin to see yourself as something greater than your fears, your anger, your mistakes, and your circumstances? There's a sentence hidden inside this message that may be more important than all the references to higher dimensions and extraterrestrial civilizations. Knowing is not enough. You can know that you should be patient and still lose your temper. You can know that compassion matters and still judge someone. You can understand forgiveness and still hold on to resentment. You can believe that everyone is connected and still treat people differently when they disagree with you. This is the difference between spiritual knowledge and spiritual action. The Arcturian message describes awakening as something that must eventually move into thought, word, and action, and that changes the meaning of the entire teaching. Because awakening is no longer an idea, it becomes a practice. How do you speak when someone insults you? How do you behave when nobody is watching? How do you react when someone succeeds where you failed? How do you treat someone who cannot give you anything in return? These moments may reveal more about your consciousness than any meditation experience ever could. A person can talk about higher frequencies for hours, but the real test begins when life becomes uncomfortable. That is where spiritual beliefs meet reality. And perhaps that is what awake in action really means. Not appearing enlightened, but becoming more conscious of what you do when life pushes your buttons. One of the most challenging ideas in the message is also one of the simplest. See other people as aspects of Source. At first, that sounds beautiful, but try applying to real life. It becomes much harder. What about someone who lies to you? Someone who insults you? Someone who intentionally hurts another person? Someone whose behavior you strongly disagree with? The message suggests that even these people have forgotten their deeper nature. They have become disconnected from who they truly are. And because of that disconnection, They may act in ways that appear cruel, selfish, or destructive, but there is a subtle danger here. Seeing humanity in someone does not mean accepting everything they do. Compassion does not require surrendering boundaries. Forgiveness does not mean pretending harm never happened. And seeing someone as a spiritual being does not mean allowing them to mistreat you. Perhaps the healthier interpretation is this: you can recognize someone's humanity without approving their behavior. You can protect yourself without becoming consumed by hatred. You can disagree without needing to destroy the person you disagree with. And that may be one of the hardest forms of spiritual practice, because it is easy to love people who agree with us. The real test is how we respond to people who challenge us. That is where consciousness becomes action. According to the message, other people often become the greatest challenge to spiritual awakening. And there is something psychologically interesting about that idea. Think about the moments when you feel most triggered. Someone says something disrespectful. Someone misunderstands you. Someone takes credit for your work. Someone attacks your beliefs. Someone behaves unfairly. In those moments, something happens inside you. Your body reacts. Your thoughts accelerate. Your emotions rise. And suddenly, the person in front of you is no longer just another human being. They become an enemy. The Arcturian message suggests that this is precisely where the work begins. Can you remain conscious while experiencing strong emotion? Can you respond instead of simply reacting? Can you remember who you want to be before anger decides for you? This does not mean becoming emotionless. It means becoming aware. Anger can exist without controlling your actions. Fear can exist without controlling your decisions. Pain can exist without becoming your identity. Perhaps this is why the message calls it a challenge. Because awakening is not tested when everything is peaceful. It is tested when everything goes wrong. The people who frustrate us may unintentionally reveal the places within ourselves that still need attention. And that makes every difficult interaction a potential mirror. The Arcturian message offers a remarkably simple practice. Begin the day with an intention before checking your phone, before reading the news, before answering messages, before allowing the outside world to decide how you feel. Choose how you want to show up. Imagine waking up and saying, "Today, I will try to see people as human beings rather than obstacles. Today, I will notice my reactions before acting on them. Today, I will remember that the way I treat others is also a reflection of who I am." It sounds simple, but simplicity does not mean weakness. A single intention can change the direction of an entire day, because consciousness often begins with noticing. Noticing your thoughts, noticing your emotions, noticing your language, noticing the moments when you automatically react. And once you notice, you have a choice. You can continue the old pattern, or you can interrupt it. That tiny moment between stimulus and response may be where real personal transformation begins. And perhaps that is what the Arcturian message means when it talks about staying in the knowing, not constantly thinking about spirituality, but carrying a deeper awareness into ordinary moments, into traffic, into conversations, into work, into relationships, into conflict, into silence. Because if consciousness disappears the moment ordinary life begins, was it ever truly integrated? The message also speaks about frequency. According to the Arcturian perspective, the Council operates at a frequency closer to Source, and through their words and energy, they supposedly remind humanity that access to this frequency already exists within us. Scientifically, this language should not be interpreted as a measurable frequency in the conventional physical sense. There is no established scientific measurement showing that human consciousness can literally tune into a ninth-dimensional source frequency. But metaphorically, the idea is powerful. Think about the emotional states you live in. Fear has one kind of effect. Anger has another. Gratitude feels different. Compassion feels different. Peace feels different. When someone says they are raising their frequency, perhaps what they are describing is a shift in the quality of their attention, emotional state, and behavior. From reaction to awareness, from fear to curiosity, from hatred to understanding, from unconscious behavior to deliberate action. In that sense, raising your frequency does not require a spacecraft. It does not require a portal. It does not even require believing in extraterrestrials. It can begin with something much more ordinary, changing the way you think, changing the way you speak, and changing the way you respond. There's another fascinating part of the message. It says that knowing who you truly are is more important than knowing every mystery about extraterrestrials, history, or the universe. This is almost the opposite of what many people expect from spiritual content. We are constantly searching for hidden information, ancient civilizations, secret technologies, UFOs, extraterrestrial civilizations, hidden histories, higher dimensions, disclosure. And there is nothing wrong with curiosity. Curiosity is one of the reasons humanity explores. But there is a danger. We can become so obsessed with discovering what is hidden outside ourselves that we stop examining what is happening inside ourselves. You can know every UFO theory on the internet and still be controlled by anger. You can study every ancient mystery and still treat people badly. You can believe in higher consciousness and still live unconsciously. Perhaps the deeper lesson of this message is that information alone does not transform us. Integration does. Knowing something and living differently because of it are two completely different things. Maybe the greatest mystery is not what is hidden in the universe. Maybe it is what human beings are capable of becoming. The message repeatedly connects the state of awareness with ascension. But what does ascension actually mean? Within spiritual traditions, ascension is often described as a movement toward higher consciousness or a higher state of being. Some interpret it literally, others understand it psychologically, and some see it as a metaphor for personal transformation. From a grounded perspective, we can interpret ascension as becoming increasingly conscious of our thoughts, emotions, choices, and relationships. Instead of living entirely through automatic reactions, we begin to observe ourselves. Instead of asking only, "What do I want?" we begin asking, "What is the consequence of what I choose?" Instead of trying to control everyone around us, we learn to control our own responses. Instead of needing everyone to validate us, we become more secure in who we are. This interpretation doesn't require us to prove the existence of the ninth dimension. It simply asks us to test the teaching in our own lives. Does becoming more aware make us more compassionate? Does it make us more responsible? Does it make us more peaceful? Does it help us handle difficult people without becoming exactly what we dislike in them? If the answer is yes, then perhaps the practical value of the teaching exists regardless of whether the metaphysical story can be scientifically verified. So what does it really mean to be spiritually awake? Maybe it is not about having special knowledge. Maybe it is not about seeing visions. Maybe it is not about communicating with beings from another dimension. Maybe awakening is much quieter. It is the moment you choose patience when anger would be easier. It is the moment you choose honesty when lying would benefit you. It is the moment you forgive without forgetting the lesson. It is the moment you set a boundary without hatred. It is the moment you see another human being as more than their worst mistake. And perhaps most importantly, it is the moment you realize that your spiritual beliefs mean very little if they never change the way you behave. The Arcturian message calls this being awake in action. Whether you believe that the Arcturians are genuinely communicating with humanity, or whether you see this message as a metaphor created through spiritual channeling, the central question remains powerful. Who are you when nobody is watching? Who are you when someone makes you angry? Who are you when you are afraid? Who are you when you have power over someone else? Because perhaps that is where consciousness is truly measured. Not in what we say we believe, but in what we repeatedly do. Maybe humanity does not need to wait for an extraterrestrial civilization to descend from the stars. Maybe the first awakening has to happen here, inside us. And if there really is a higher consciousness waiting for humanity, perhaps the first step toward it is not looking into the sky. Perhaps it is learning how to look at each other differently. This is the crystal mind. We first listen to the story. Then we look behind it to discover what is actually true.